Are we in a worldwide experiment? Are we dealing with an experimental virus? Was this lockdown necessary? All that and more on today's talk because I just did a video and it was a song, but it doesn't actually convey the same way you can actually use words to present ideas. So that's what this whole conceptual merging is coming into play. So let's dive in today. For those who are meeting me for the first time, I'm TC, like the letters T and the letters C, or as the government likes to call me, Eric TC. But we're here because I actually have some questions I'm proposing. And I have my reflections to give on that. So here we are. Let's dive in. Let's not waste your time here. So are we in a worldwide experiment? I like to think so that yes, we are at many multiple levels. I could say that there's many experiments taking place, and many experiments being funded and that are out there in the open that involve using the social constructs or using our geological constructs in which we are living within to conduct experiments. But can we focus in on the moment of right now, where the themes are both dealing with potential of a virus as well as a lot of ideas in terms of how well do we react under pressure. So this worldwide experiment, to keep this within a frame, we're going to look at the current events. So this experiment that could be taking place is something that is having maybe two sides of a coin. On one end, you're dealing with what is the virus itself. Is it something that is indeed existing? Because we do have seasonal flus, and they do come around. And as they are spreading, they are existing at their own path and are mutating in a almost multifaceted way where each individuals and their body can actually dictate what will happen with it, whether it succumbs to the body being too strong for it and thus is not even able to actually have an effect on the body, or in turn, the idea of being the body under certain conditions would introduce this, and now it can evolve, become stronger, or adapt as we do. Because we are both living organisms. So why is that not just as important to consider that if we're living organisms that can adapt and grow, and if we're dealing with something, then we could build up resilience no differently than plants and bugs have built up resilience for even the chemical fertilizers, which are actually in question altogether for that industry. But when you're dealing with these kind of like injections of artificial boosting, you kind of see that these are more experimental takes on things. So are we dealing with an experimental virus would then be the next question to come to ask. Now, the virus in its nature, yes, seems like a seasonal flu, but I cannot actually take the numbers that are being taken as something that is just more of a weight of what is going on, because I've seen death rates that are more years in the past for things that aren't even equal. I've seen cases in which numbers have been included due to the fact of unknown but possibilities. And at the same time, too, if you're looking at the number game, then they're just illusion, because then you're looking at proportions and comparisons rather than what is the overall arching case here. So you're looking more at kind of a distraction than, hey, what's the root of what's going on here? How can we solve that? Instead, we're reporting more on where this is going bad and what we don't understand or what we can repel against this. This is very biased kind of approach to it. But I mean, when you're living in Western world and the media that we are presented with has its already strong slap of bias on it, we can't help but notice these things. So if we're dealing with an experimental strain, that would suggest that we're actually having something that is just not normally out of the blue. So for the rate at which everyone reacted, definitely suggested that this is not just something that we should take with ease, but that many, many larger institutions, and including people who do not agree with one another on the geopolitical page, they are all taking similar actions. So that brings in the question that the threat is not just a play anymore, but there is something at play. Now, if it was a bioweapon in that case, an experimental strain that was not only just its natural construct, but then it was played with no differently than GMOs have been, we are looking at maybe something that is a lot bigger that is being reacted because we never have dealt with something like this at a scale. It was inevitable because of these experiments existing, so measures and preparations have probably honestly been given into figures. But these figures and maybe the experts that are associated with that fail to actually deliver on the human aspect of things, our potential not only to react but understand, but to expand beyond it. Now, so what is the nature of this virus in itself? Well, I like to see that it targets weak immune systems and malnutrition. So it's very much reported how those that are affected are likely ones that are succumb to a weak immune system, like you weren't able to deal with it, so now it's latched onto you and you are pretty much victim to the seasonal flu already. So that is already a case because maybe it was nutrition in your body, or maybe it's the way that you didn't give yourself enough sleep or didn't take care of your own body. So you allowed yourself to be susceptible to the seasonal flu anyway. So that's kind of like an entry door. Number two, if you're malnutrition, that means maybe the Western diet in itself needs to be in question because we need to source things back to actually whole foods because that's kind of what matters. Like I said, backyard gardening. And when we're looking at the actual nutrition we can provide our own body, it's around us. It's in food. It's through things that we can actually even supplement because we're able to source on a very global scale. And think about using herbs or roots that are associated in South America or India that can play benefit to what can aid you. So this idea of introducing these things into medicine is just as much as a challenge to Western medicine altogether for their approach in handling of what they perceive as this virus in itself. So if this is the case, the people I've seen talk about this and people who really go in depth about it, which will do a way more better job, and I say do your own research, I say the thing is it's all about having a healthy system, because I've been saying this from the start. You can look that back at months and all that you want to take care and have a healthy defense by actually understanding your own body and working with that. So I still want to make this other video of this acronym of ACID, of ACID. A is your antiviral. So you're dealing with something like chaga or many other things, and then you apply that. So that's your A. Now your I, your immune. Sorry about that. Your C. Your C is your vitamin C. So you got your A, your C of acid, and then you got your I, which is your immune boost, and your D, which is your vitamin D. So your immune boost can actually supplement for a number of things, whether it's assisting with your immune boosting abilities through garlic or immune boosting abilities from anti-inflammatory pursuits, even the ways that we take in certain vitamin C, for example. The vitamin C and vitamin D all help. You want vitamin D to pair with vitamin C so that when you absorb it in your body, that it can process. So the idea is that when you are taking vitamin C to boost your immune system, you're applying it. But at the same time, too, if you got immune boosting stuff that has like high vitamin C content in it, like camu camu powder, that is going to also help your body. So when you're dealing with a virus that is targeting your immune system, the best defense is one that actually nurtures and grows your immune system so that it's healthy and strong. It's like a cavity. If you're going to continue to feed it sugar, it will break away. And at the same time, too, you got to understand that the ideas of what sugars are very well are what feed cancers. So when we reevaluate our relationship with food and our body and the way we actually understand medicine, I think this whole opportunity is taking place is that we don't have to actually take an authoritative body, but be open-minded to see what is available out there, especially now that we can connect like never before. So now that this whole virus aspect has been taken care of, I think that, yes, you feel that there is an experimental strain to it because I feel there's levels of HIV that is, like I said, is present. And that's why mushrooms themselves, like chaga and other mushrooms themselves, are beneficial in helping your system get a lot of these viruses and other systems and symptoms out of your body by detoxing, absorbing it, repelling it, or using a number of neutralizing methods. And when you're applying that to your body and giving it at least a little bit of nutrients, even if you don't know it, and whether it's in supplementation form or you have some sort of powder that you can take, whether in the tea or you add it to like little meals, like when you season your flowers or something like that, there is always a degree in which you can always incorporate little things that help your health. So yes, if you're dealing even with an experimental strain, the same concept would still approach for the same solution. Even if this is a seasonal flu and was able to mutate to this degree, I would feel that these same approaches would still fit for not only reasonable solutions, but ideas to deal with this problem. So how was this problem dealt with? Now, that is bringing us to the question, was this lockdown even necessary? And the effects that are now unraveling because of it, and who has unrolled it into place or put these measures so that actions can be taken, what kind of idea is being taken now? And where can we see by studying what has come out of it, what motivations would be beneficial for those who have put it in case, as well as those who have put it against, as well as those that are the countries inhibiting it. So, for example, the lockdown itself. If we were to look at Sweden, who did not put any lockdown in place, but instead said respectful to the human person to still honor social distancing and things like that, so that if there is any contagion going around, or any sort of virus in its general right of an individual passing along something else from their immune system to weaken immune systems, that still measures can be taken. But did we have to put a halt on so many different things? Now, that gives me more the idea that the lockdown in place, it might have other motivations to it. And it's just not just how we are kept inside and more affected to say, hey, please don't be in crowds, please don't work together, and please don't communicate on this or form communities, which is the opposite of what they want. They want you to be as separated as possible. So there is a key of division taking place. And it's also weakening the system. Is it also something that is grander beyond us? For example, if we were dealing with a cosmic energy that comes through the sun of its journey through, and it was to hit us no differently than the geoelectrical magnetics that also affect the changing weather, and also these new increase of geomagnetic storms that are hitting us through the sun's electromagnetics, we are actually taking into consideration that maybe there's a force at play that is beyond us, that is actually affecting people who would be in large crowds. So maybe this is partially in play to adhere so that we can not have influence or herd mentality that would take place. Now, the thing is, herd mentality in something like Sweden itself is more used as the word in place for people who are able to make use with these energies productively, but at the same time to keep things in a safe and standard way. But the thing is, their economy, that did not need to be halted. Jobs did not need to be halted. Schools did not need to be closed. As much as I say that these systems are not the greatest at all, they are still taking them away better than nothing. So when you're at least transitioning to a new system, it is the idea that we can actually rely on something before we can fully step into the other. But when you're forced into it, now that type of change is something that we enact on our own right. So we're free will beings and we, do as we wish. So if we wanted to do that by our own will, then that's our own charge to do so. But I think what is being challenged here at the greatest degree would be collective compliancy. It's kind of like a diagnostic test. If you want to see how well everyone would listen to government or authority or centrals or figures and stuff like that, how well can something like this been played? I feel like we've experimented in media and in news in many geopolitical reasons of messing with news or messing with social means. And if you think this does not exist, I would say look at every major social network platform. They've done experiments on the users, and at the same time too, most of them at the guise of advertising, which is to sell you something. So we're trying to monetize the individual, and this is not what I feel is maybe the best case, because now you're dealing with things that are more irreversible. So now you're out in the open with something like that, and if you're dealing with collective compliancy, then you're taking this on a mass scale. So this is more just an experiment that if we say, hey, you got to do this, 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 and this, what stands against that? What goes against it? I know some states, like if you look at Michigan and other areas, we see how some of these states have maybe some more drastic measures, or saying you can't buy seeds in a time where it's springtime. We should be growing our own food for anyone who has any sense in mind of what is coming their way. So if this is more in change of what we can do, then we shouldn't be limited. And if we're being limited, then those authoritative figures are standing in the way, then that is going to be challenged by the individual's will. So if they don't have faith in that system anymore and they just see them as a blockage and they don't really understand the good faith of what is actually important, then they're going to see that for what they are, which is actually a blessing in disguise for anyone. But it's still, hey, we don't have to do things the hard way. But if they want to do more of this display, I think the people themselves are going to be that little spark of wild cards that really give us that more, hey, we don't have to take this. Do you see what's going on? Let's question things. We're not going to just be all idle and stuff like that, because we are living, breathing, thinking, and we're processing it. And even if some of us are just so entrained by maybe their jobs or their cycles that they just so are, I guess, rhythmic to, we're not kind of actually questioning a lot of things. But many of us are so disrupted at this moment in time where this whole collective compliancy is actually being challenged. So many of us are actually taking action by our own means, by realizing the scarcity at hand. And what is going to take place is the limitations forced upon us are going to either allow us to recognize where can we grow beyond that, but also challenge those limitations to say, are these for us? Like, for example, if you're a plant growing and you can't grow in these rocks, you realize, wow, okay, you're not going to thrive here. But if somebody was to come and take that and put that in a field where you can spread those roots, or the roots themselves have to grow around and over it, either way, the growth cycle has to go beyond what was currently present. So if we're in that type of status, we're going to either have to go beyond what is currently present, or are we going to have to migrate the whole concept to some new system or some kind of way of doing things? It doesn't even have to be described as a system, but it's more of a practice, or maybe a long-term, I guess, external reliability would be a great way of putting it. So let's go back. Since we're dealing with the central authority, you're looking at, yes, central authority over local body. So if we're seeing what took place, I'd say in 2001, in which a lot of laws got enacted thereafter, and what got challenged was the rights of the countries itself, because then if you lived in these countries, then what was capable of what can be done, or your rights as human beings, whether it's data collection or just the ability for them to actually say this is fair, right, and use for our country to utilize to our means, we are taking that information after 20 years and now applying it to a big degree of the digital stage. Now the digital Wild West is still developing, but the degree of we're kind of like censoring it or kind of like curtailing it so that it grows a certain way is almost like an unnatural bonsaiing, where we're actually cutting and shaping and forming it to be something that shouldn't be in the sake of having a vision beforehand. But sometimes that we want to shape things, we take control over things, but sometimes it's best to let nature take its course. So if we're looking at the central authority over a local body, your local body is your own nature, it's your own living organism. So if we are challenging one another to actually say like, all right, now the threat is no longer from other countries, that you need to be protected on what we protect you with, now the threat is on your own bodies. And if you don't take measures, we're going to take enforced measures so that you yourself are in your best right. Now, what is your best right? Do you get to decide that, or is that something that's saying that we feel that your rights are this? When you're allowing someone else to choose your rights, that is going to be a challenge. So your local body, who you are, what you do, what you can do. The question is what they can apply upon you. They can't technically inject something into you and force you to do that. You actually have to allow them. That's a whole process of agreement. And if you don't have that agreement, then you're breaking the very basic natural law in which you are participating as living in a universe and being a living, breathing, thinking individual. So if that is not present right there and then that whole modality is, in question. So when you're dealing with the central body and this authoritative state, whether it's government or the systems, even the medical systems or systems that are applying to say like, all right, if you want to meet these standards, then you're going to have to deal with this, this, and this. Or if you want to allow this happen, for example, there's a lot of talk about vaccination in terms as if there was global vaccination, everything could go back to normal. I think that is more of a scapegoat for utilizing a means that has a very limited bandwidth for something more broader that is already practical, local to us, and can be done at our own hands, rather than something that is experimental even more. And instead of taking an artificial injection towards a solution, we can actually address it at the root and allow ourselves to grow in the process. So why do you need to give the kids stilts when in reality, over periods of time of physical therapy, you can actually grow it and use it just as you didn't need the stilts at all. So however you want to look at stilts, crutches, whatever those words may be. Anyway, so like when we're going back to the topic at hand here, when we're dealing with the local body, okay, now we're dealing with social warfare. And that is because when you're seeing people demonize their peers, whether it's in the workplace or it's in the streets while you're going about or grocery shopping, even the very concept of just like your neighbors, they are all there with you. But as people start turning and demonizing the individuals that are around them or seeing that they are the enemy, then you've seen the shift of how in 2001, we've seen a whole shift over a 5-year course of legislation, shift our mindset to say the enemy is outside of us to now the enemy is us. So when the enemy is each of us, we divide on each other, and that division is not even going to bridge any community. Instead, we're going to allow that to create more scarcity. And I guess you want to have like one versus another. So like when that is present and that is going on, then we're going to give ourselves maybe like a little boost or a little something that is going to say, hey, we're not going to take this anymore. And if we're not going to take that anymore, then we can at least provide some sort of alternative route or opportunity so that you're not going to continue to be on the same cycle or repeating the same things. And if we can watch other people take those same cycles or evolve out of them, then that actually could spread as a concept, as an idea, as something to be like, okay, we can go beyond. And that realization is very easy when you can introduce little practical methods as examples to show how a use case or a way of being or way of living can actually exist outside of what authoritative states can actually tell you would be or should be. In which case, like I said, in terms of where do you give your power. Now, is this social warfare fair? No, I don't think that any of it is actually being provided, and a lot of it is so easily welcomed because I think we've done a rollout in which I'd say for the past maybe more than 50, 60 years at least, there's been a development of generational conditioning, whether if you want to look at television programming, social programming, denial of reasons, as well as choking out a creativity in the collective and holding people back, like the no children left back behind. Okay, so people who cannot advance don't advance. You're going to stay back, and that's going to stifle growth always. So if that is the case, then yeah, people in those scenarios are just going to be more accepting to what is going on because they don't have a good sense of who they are or where they are in the world. They still need other people to help shape that for them, and without that, they would be lost. So the idea that most of us can actually center and turn within is going to be a big deal. But let's see. Instead of the idea of social warfare, that's going to be happening on an individual stance. Some people are not going to deal with it. Some people are going to have mindsets. We cannot change and control people, and some people are going to go through hardships. That's going to be impossible to avoid. But the way we handle it and the way we react and the way we decide to go about that from there, that's on a very human nature level. I think we can inspire to be the best we can be, and if we're not, then we're in a challenge to introduce more complications and variables that not only challenge the plate at, I'd say, collective survival, but I'd say this is more collective growth. You don't want to create the cancer. You want to allow it to be in a environment where the acidic is no longer present by introducing more of a pH scale, in which case now you're allowing the cell to thrive in a system in which this thing that takes away from it and almost vampirically zaps away its life force or utilizes it as a platform for its own growth. Then we can exchange the idea that we ourselves are no different than the cells in our body. And if we decide to actually shift the scale in which we allow our balance to take place, then we can provide ourselves a proper and more nutrient environment that we ourselves are expanding and growing at a way that is not held back. We're not in a cement sidewalk and a tree's trying to pop up. We're more in a field, and it's the natural ecosystem back in balance. And I think we need to see where do we connect that network of how the natural world is playing together and apply that on a collective stance. So we're figuring that out, and that's what's happening. But that also is challenging a lot of things that are in place right now as I speak. And that is pretty much economic warfare. So I can see for a while now, whether you're looking at cryptocurrencies, silver, gold, money, whatsoever, these are economic warfare at its finest, where some measures have been taken to control or influence the stream in which these commodities are used in terms of exchange or propped up by the fact of illusions. We are still providing power and authority to these natures, and because they have such a huge influence on how many things circulate in exchange for many individuals, even on a small scale, this idea of it being challenged is not only going to be uncomfortable for many, but it's actually kind of already decaying, but we're just not able to look at it. So many of us are trying to pump it into the system in terms of just having good faith. Some of us, like the Fed, are printing it endlessly in terms of saying, all right, if we keep printing, then everything should be good. But you know what that does? That creates a huge volume of more in it. Like, let's say if the economy was ill and right now you got like this much sludge in it, and you were to add just more volume to that, that sludge is just going to dilute. And when you're diluting it, that's kind of what hyperinflation is on a level of saying, hey, now what this thing that meant something now doesn't mean something because it's now contaminated. So, hey, I just hit something right on the spot there. They're going to apply that same method to the idea of cash itself. So if you're going to deal with a commodity that is contaminated, then there's going to have to be something dealt with so that it's going to be rolled back, exchanged, or done elsewhere. But I think that many of these economic models are not only being in control, but have been influenced because of the amount that they were able to have their share in rooting it. Or whether it's the institutions that allowed these more ideas to be saying, all right, this is where it's at, or this is where we're going to say as the main model. So even if those models are faulty, they will still be taken as the authoritative state of where things are. So if that is the case, then maybe we're dealing with something that is completely different. So I'll introduce this wild card of saying that what if the economy itself was already starting to fail and we weren't ready for it? And at the same time, too, maybe a lot of these pressures that are being taken place to make it worse were kind of speeding up the process because it took us straight into removing some of the factors that transitions us. So we're totally definitely like a couple spaces ahead, but I think that either way we would have ended up here because it's failing, and some of the actions taken during these lockdown measures include measures that improve and allow the economy to just stay on life support. For example, if you weren't in school, the amount of food supply that had to be gone there, that wouldn't have to hit that way. The amount of shortages that are happening in restaurants and stuff like that. We have food shortages that don't know where to go because we don't have the systems in place to provide the food. And as that locality finds its place, I'm sure it will grow. But that also states the where we are on the Western diet as more of a nation and collective. And I know there are people who are listening around the world, so this is more just a Western point of view of perceiving this as I grow up within the United States. So seeing that this is a common practice for people and it's accepted worldwide, not worldwide, but this is the American life, that this is what they eat and all that stuff, as this is what they're programming, it's what's on their TV, and if they don't go with that flow, then they're going to be outcasts, and the outcasts are never going to be feeling too good if they don't have a sense of self. So if this is a war on the economy itself, removing the factors of allowing people to continue to get work, to continue to provide, continue on those external surfaces, are being challenged. Because we're seeing that, all right, we might be able to fix this temporarily, but we're still dealing with something that is going to like crash down on us. And if we're not prepared in those situations, use these moments as a wake-up call. So whether this is being done as like a nice little, everybody take stock of everything that's in place now and try to deal with it and understand what we're going through, is that an experiment? Or are we actually doing a slow roll of economic warfare where we're actually removing cash because of the disguise of contagions and the warfare on the individual? Or at the same time too, are we actually trying to transition the economy, or is it just crashing faster? Or is it being used as a weapon so that certain countries can internally be like swindled or manhandled, I would say, into these sort of cohesion tactics of saying, hey, all right, you're not going to help us here, we're going to do this. If you're going to assist us and allow us to do this, then we're not going to do that. And some of these include economic warfare. We'll look at the oils, price warfare there. Things have gone crazy because Saudi Arabia decided to allow themselves to challenge the global authority of going against Russia in terms of oil supply. So the oil supply is now being challenged because of the amount that is all out there on there, and that's decreasing. And whether that's being given a story or this is just the outcome of what the economy itself is shaping down to be because of how everything is just now coming to a crash, we can't help but see, all right, if we're going to pump into stuff, whatever, you're pumping into the people, you're pumping into the companies, you're pumping into the economy, you're pumping into any of it, you're still pumping. So you're putting up stilts to hold up an illusion that is not really made to last. And if anything's made to last, then we need to develop an alternative system. So that kind of brings in the state and future of the economy. We're not doing too good. We're on life support, and I think any hope that this will actually transition to something better is very little. Even if the idea of utilizing cryptocurrency or blockchain technology to evolve the dollar, I would still have no faith in wanting to use a dollar. But at the same time too, I would exchange my modality of working with people to say, all right, I'll use a cryptocurrency. Let's say if I'm doing online exchange where you need to buy bulk food, or you're doing digital service or providing exchange where it's like micro crowdsourcing in a way. And you utilize this to then exchange it to another means of goods. So you can exchange back into whatever is used in the US or whatever is used elsewhere, or apply these all together and circumvent those economies, because you're dealing with then laws and legislation that are in place to either keep those economies alive or to at the same time to keep other economies from overshadowing it. So we are still developing means to go around these larger economies, and I think the more we get practical means in actual people's hands and utilizing that, that's going to actually change the game, because then it's, like I said, always up to the individual. So the future of the economy, that is actually going to go to whether or not individuals themselves can evolve around that. Now that can't help but say it's so simple, but at the same time too, avoid the topic of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. So when you're dealing with cryptocurrencies are going to be questionable altogether, because people say, oh, it's all Bitcoin. and I don't trust it because it's all digital or this and that. And like, yeah, we have a relationship with technology where we don't fully understand it. So as you learn more about it, we can utilize that so that we ourselves understand it and actually work with it. It's like learning programming. You might not know how to do a website, but when you learn how to code and use the language to actually use the system and provide the functionality, you then can understand that this is more, a website is not something that controls you, you control it. So if that's the case, you are the creator of your own website. If you allow yourself to go to WordPress and use their coding and have them assist you in something that's more of a user face for someone who's unfamiliar with coding, that's existing too. But that is going to exist for more of this blockchain technology because the technology itself is where we're seeing the revolution take place. That's why anyone itself can create a cryptocurrency or utilize the blockchain to create more of a trustless ledger so that we can actually keep track of things. For example, if we're having an economy where the money's printed all the time, there's no record that says, all right, everything's still fair and the dollar's still worth a dollar. If you have something that actually is tied to something that we can actually say is more open source in a way that we actually have access to it and we're not told to have good faith, we can at least trust that system by verifying it by our own means. And we can verify transactions, we can verify our own bank, and we can take measures to be what we want. So this is what I see is why the blockchain technology is actually innovative, because it introduces this. Whether Bitcoin itself takes the biggest plate on the table is only because it was the first of the game. But at the same time too, I see no differently attempts from like aspects of other countries and other financial institutions trying to get in on it because they themselves can either create a centralized system or a system that can interact or kind of connect as intersector for these digital currencies. And if that was the factor too, then implications that are measuring the worth and value of those cryptocurrencies are in state by the institutions that have decided to create them. So programming comes down to if the more open source we can do it, or the more idea that we can create something that is actually going to help and be there for others to pick up and use, that is going to be the keys, because we're not trying to say, all right, if you stay around or trust us for this long, then we'll teach you how to fish. We're not here to challenge you and put that time in. We're here to say, all right, if you want to get serious about it, it's here. Let's do it. Let's work our way up. But cryptocurrency and blockchain, that's going to be more on an indication of what people create. Now, I think social networks are all going to be a challenge, and the way that we interact with them is more of a collective participation. Many of us are swindled right now to stay on Facebook, even though their very actions speak otherwise to what the individual would probably approve of. And even if you want to agree to say, all right, I'm doing it because I want to stay connected, that is the sole main reason. At the same time, too, that sole main reason of how we can stay connected to another, regardless of algorithm at play, can actually exchange the ideas that these social networks are actually afraid of putting out there, which is why censorship and things are taken into place. Because if you were to apply that to something that's greater than the whole, then you got to realize the lowest common denominator is what they're going to measure things by. And if you're dealing with, let's say, advertisers, and that's their income, then they're going to focus more on that end. They're not there to give you a social network. They're there to collect data. So when you see that, okay, that's a data collecting company and not a social network company, then you're going to be like, okay, where my participation in it, that will change as well. I've been off Facebook for years because I decided to have a better relationship, but they also own Instagram, and I'm still on there. But I'm on there, and it kind of feels like a Stockholm syndrome, but at the same time, too, it's how we connect with one another. But I think that I'm still trying to use alternative methods, and as the collective becomes more aware of these alternative methods, you're going to see more of a transition of what happened with MySpace to Facebook, in which you're going to see more of a migration. And that migration is more for example of others coming into it. Because I'd say it's the ability to create the trend is the ability to create a good foundation for people to, I guess, grow on. So when that is in play, and that is actually like perfected or tuned into reality, I'm sure more people will pick up on it and it will gain its momentum. No differently than individuals who respect their own privacy or what goes on the internet, there's people who are willing to take action to improve that measures. So cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, they're both are things that actually could play a good role in implementing them. It's like a tool. It's how you use it. So yeah, people will abuse that just as much as it itself can be something that can be helpful. But at the same time, too, it's no substitute. And if we are our own bank, then that in turn gives our power, instead of trusting a system where they actually create their money by their interest rates, we instead allow ourselves to not actually deal with an institution that decides to take practices away from how we connect with our exchange. So if we are in control of that, or if we have a share, then that scarcity effect in which we exchange our goods or provide value, that is going to grow. And that model, however we will shape it, will define itself. And that brings me to say who controls and has a say, and that really is the collective. So If this is something that is going on right now, then yeah, I see it expressed that we're all dealing with it at our own pace. And a lot of it is dealing with different flavors. Some of us are dealing with different countries with different currencies, and others are dealing with currencies that are connected to these other countries that they don't realize that because this country exists, that they have an influence over how this country's, I guess, quality of life is. So it's going to change and it's going to grow. And I think we're going to become more aware of the world. I think awareness is going to be the biggest one that we're going to be like, all right, take a breath, look around, and then utilize that information so that we take things to the greater level. Now, as the astrological themes about things, I like to actually go into the astrology because it's a good way of interpreting an external worldview to apply maybe like forces at play. Because if you're in the middle of an ocean and you got huge ships around you and you're in a little rowboat, you want to at least feel that if there's going to be a huge wave coming this way, you're not going to be facing it and you're going to let it hit you and smack you into the water. No one wants that. So when I look at this, I like to apply the archetypes and resonances that I have associated through my own practices of, I think art itself is just like this, where you take a practice and you allow it to grow, but you learn as you grow, and you're never going to be the best because you're always growing to be that best. So just astrology itself is a study of collections of ideas and concepts of how we can apply and how we correlate and then dissect and grow, and this evolving practice over the years between different people using different ideas and then allowing that to be connected to verifications and then over a period of time and then testing back and forth. It's a whole process, and anything is a process. So the astrological themes that are going on right now is that if we were to look at all the zodiacs, however you want to look at sidereal, Vedic, or tropical, the zodiacs are a wheel. And if you want to start one end of how we start things and bring things all the way around, and if that was a whole theme, then that theme itself, a lot of our sectors of the sky are taking place in the themes of systematic control and external security, which is more governments, authority, economy, wealth systems, career, a lot of those things. That, as well as the energy and flavors of the collective, the network. Once you have those systems, how do you connect and bridge those? And at the same time, too, what holds that all together, like the internet itself, like the technology, or what creates that we are the water droplets of the cloud itself that connect this whole system, but at the same time, too, we're individual participating in a collective. And that's essentially what that Aquarian energy is, the water bearer. So we're looking at this Capricorn and Aquarius heavy theme, transitioning, because these are long-term planets that are taking their time. They're also having multiple planets, whether you're looking at Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. These major planets are about transformation, expansion, and those that even dictate the systems that are around us. These things are not only being challenged, transformed, but we're taking into awareness a larger degree of what does it mean to us and the relationship we have with it. So as this plays a key on how we traverse our path, then that itself will open doors. But without recognizing that, these themes of the ideas of governments and systems being challenged and dissolving away and what actually is true and authentic, sometimes we have to allow it to sink back into the earth so that new growth can come through. And at other times, too, we can transition it, for example, to be something brand new. A tree that has fallen into the forest can always dissolve, but at the same time, too, it can be taken and turned into some beautiful work of art. It's what we do with it, because the potential is always within our hands. So however you want to look at that, we're always going to be free will, but the understanding of how these methods and ideas are being applied on a collective, I think is helpful. But I won't go too in depth with that. And as I said, a lot of this stuff that we're going through needs to be said, and I think the conversation ideas are there. So if you take this and roll with it, that's great. If you want to connect and do something, that's also great. I think as we realize this individually, there's going to be a lot of different perspectives, and they all play a role. We're trying to understand a sculpture that nobody has the best perspective of. And at the same time, too, when you're dealing with a sculpture, the sculptor itself has to apply techniques that they don't actually see something in one-dimensional space of you in front of it perceiving it. They see more of a 3D visual space of how to express something, an idea, how does it blossom. But the way they have a relationship with culminating an idea is something that is beyond just what the experience of seeing it in person is like. So I think many of us are coming together to realize the idea of what process means. How do we have a successful long-term process? And how do we make sure that the roots and the energetic efforts that we apply ourselves by are being put where it counts? So I think that is up to the individual, as I personally find that our own hands and ability to do things is limitless. So backyard gardening, we can apply our own food. The way we interact and connect ideas and connect with each other, that's the way we can spread things. The way we're passionately driven by the fires within, that can give us the energy, the inspiration, the ideas of seeing examples of living and living by experience. So that can apply to things that are major. And then, of course, the earth, the stability, the long term. A lot of earthy themes are being challenged, and I think we're going through Taurus season, stepping into Gemini. And before we get into a lot of other astrological themes I'll lose you with, we're seeing a lot of things that are easing at the place, but at the same time too, when you're dealing with like the out of the nowhere idea of what Taurus can deal with a Uranus in it, then you're going to have to realize that maybe a lot of the things that are going to develop are going to be out of the blue, and we might not have all the answers. But I don't think we always have to have all the answers in the present. So the idea, if we are present and to take things more of a, hey, let's see where we are, let's trust ourselves, and let's go and continue our journey from there. We don't have to set these expectations or realities that now might not even be able to exist, so that we can adapt and evolve something that is more true and authentic, that we ourselves are the answer. So I hope that sums it up, and I actually appreciate you tuning in. And if this is something that, hey, like I said, it's awesome, cool. If you want to see more of this stuff, say something. I don't go too much out there, but this is just something that I personally wanted to put an idea since I actually created a song, or attempted to. And it was just, hey, cool, that's something I did. But now it's just, hey, let's say it out loud. And some of these ideas, just I wanted to reflect on the moment, what we're going through now. Whether people tune into me or not, I don't know if this is for my own health case of just expressing it or putting out there. But I think maybe for like the one or two people who will check this out, I think that I see it's worth it. I keep thinking back of this joke that I've seen in a show, how like, it's like the idea of a podcaster saying, hey, to my one subscriber, I'm doing this for you. And when in reality, when we are taking that mindset, I find that, hey, if I do this and I do this because I want to do it, I'm expressing myself and I'm living my authentic life in the best way as I traverse it. I don't have to be tied to this at the same time too. I don't have to commit to saying, all right, this is what I'm going to do day in, day out. I don't have to report the news to you. I just give my creative point of view, and I'm being more adaptive because at the same time too, I guess if you want a little tidbit of what's going on behind the scenes, I'm kind of redeveloping how I'm connected with the world and kind of bring things back to my identity as who I am as an artist. And I think that's what we're all doing, essentially, just seeing who we are and where we stand, because we got to get that long-term, I guess, structure. Because without that stable foundation, then many of us are going to be making do at more of a quicker pace than those that are willing to actually plant the roots that are necessary. So, won't keep you too long. Hey, what's the time on here? 42 minutes? Wow, that's crazy. I guess we just turned this into like almost a podcast. So, adios, people, and I wish you well. Thank you again for tuning in, and like I said, connect with yourself and connect with the universe. And I think develop those relationships, and wherever it will take you, I think it will be meaningful. So take care, and as always, stay true.